but we have been working with ITIL now for a good long while, and I have taught the ITIL foundation level class to literally thousands of students, and it is an interesting tool that we want to talk about. Okay, and once I get this to go here, a little bit about who really needs to be here, and I know we have several people here. Business managers within any company that utilizes IT services, and in this day and time, that's obviously every business that there is. In fact, one of the things that I do when I teach an ITIL class is I ask the students to go through a scenario in which they talk about some of the possibilities for a business as if they were the customers of the business and not the IT people. And at the end of that exercise, and we go through and identify several characteristics that a customer would like to see, I ask them how many of these things that we listed, and we usually list 10 to 20 things, are in some way related to technology. And after they look at it for a little while, they'll answer all of them. And they may argue about a few of them, but for the most part, they will find some connection between that. So every business, it seems, nowadays is involved in some kind of technological means of storing data and information and gaining knowledge from that. Okay, so business managers are good people to attend this kind of webinar. Obviously, IT directors and IT managers are good people to look at this, as well as other stakeholders in IT services and projects. Anyone who has a vested interest in the outcome of an IT project or an IT service would be someone who would use this. Okay. Now, what you should expect to get out of this is, first of all, a good idea of what ITIL is and what it can do for your business. And I kind of was interested and almost chuckled a bit when I saw the title that they were going to ask me to give, and that's the business interest or the business reasons for having ITIL. Well, that's really the only reason for doing ITIL, is how can it benefit the business? And we stress that all throughout all of our classes, that business is at the key. Okay? And so we want to give you a good idea of what ITIL is and what it can do for your business, and then how your IT department can provide value to the business through the IT services that are being delivered through clearly defined processes. Okay? Well, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and then about our agenda for the day today. My name is Lynn Trapp. I'm a regional trainer for New Horizons in Atlanta, Georgia. I have actually taught for New Horizons now for several years, 6 years this go round. I used to work for New Horizons in Dallas, Texas, and I was a trainer, training supervisor, training manager, and IT director for New Horizons in Dallas and Fort Worth, and worked for them for 4 years back then. So all of that kind of IT-related training information, but I've done a number of other things as well. For around 28 years, I've been involved in information technology in one capacity or another, and over 20 of those years have been involved in some way in IT service management in some way or another. I've been, as I mentioned, I've been a training manager, I've been an IT manager, I've been an application manager. Okay. So I've done a lot of those different kinds of things. So our agenda for the day, we're going to start off with some introductions, although I'm going to kind of pass some of that because I've actually just got that set up for you to tell me about you, but I'm going to skip that slide when we get there. Okay. But we're going to start by asking the question, what is ITIL? Okay. ITIL. As I usually say to my classes, you may have heard of it, you may know how to spell it, but otherwise you may not be very familiar with the concept or the idea of ITIL. And so we're going to answer that question first. Then we're going to look at how you provide value to business through IT services. And that's the key, basically, to what ITIL is doing. Its entire concept is based around the idea of providing value to a business in some way or another through the delivery of IT services at any point in time. So we'll look at that. We're also going to look at how ITIL can be both flexible and stable. How can it provide flexibility? How can it provide stability? And it certainly does that. It has certain kinds of things that are part of the framework that are built into that. And then last, we're going to talk about continual service improvement, which in some ways is sort of the foundation on which everything around the ITIL framework is built, because we're trying to constantly do a better job, and so that's what continual service improvement is all about. Okay? So like I said, I did have an introduction thing here, and I'm going to bypass this at this point in time, just because we're of the nature of this, and we're going to move over to our question, what is ITIL? Okay? So ITIL actually stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library. And it literally is that, as you'll see in a slide coming up in a moment. It's a library of books. And there are 5 books in the primary library. Now, these books are published and maintained by the UK government, okay, in an organization inside the UK government known as the Office of Government Commerce. Okay. And many years ago, back in the 1980s, they started to get complaints. And you understand, here in America, we have a slightly different economy than they do in the United Kingdom. And there, obviously, the government was much more closely connected with businesses than the government might be here in the United States. And so, therefore, when complaints about information technology services were addressed, they were quite often addressed to the Office of Government Commerce. And I think it had another name back then. And so they decided to put together a panel of people to see if they couldn't figure out the best way to do things. And they got business leaders and IT leaders from all over the world to come together and to help them understand what was involved in this. And so they put together a series of books, and I believe there were more than 20 books the first go-round in version 1 of that. But they had companies like Microsoft and HP and several other big, large IT service providing organizations of all different kinds and shapes and sizes. Okay? And they got them together and they said, come up with something that shows us a better way to do this. And they came out with those 19 books. Well, that obviously that are 20 plus books. So that made a lot of reading material, obviously, for a lot of people. And so they went to version 2. And in version 2 of ITIL, they pared down the number of books. They combined a few together with some of them. They eliminated some, and they created some new ones. But they ended up with 7. Okay? And so that went on for a while in version 2. Then when version 3 came out in around 2005, I want to say, 2003 or 2005, somewhere in that time frame, they pared down the number of books again to 5. And we've gone through all of version 3 and several little minor changes to version 3 into what is now known as the 2011 edition of ITIL, which is where we're at right now. And through those 2 versions, we've had 5 books, and only 5 books. And they're listed on this slide. Okay? You'll notice at the center, in the little circle, the first one is service strategy. Okay? And so that's at the center or the core of ITIL. And that's one of the names of one of the books, okay? Is service strategy. Then there is service design, service transition, and service operations that wrap around that. And they're kind of based on the concept of what do we do in strategy, which is a long-term plan, and then how do we, in the more medium term, put that into effect, and even in the short term. And so we do that through service design and service transition and service operations, but you never get away from strategy. Those things in that outer circle only turn because the inner circle is turning. Finally, on the very outside is the last circle, and it's labeled continual service improvement. And so that's the fifth of the books, and it's a continually moving. And in some ways, you could say that's where the rubber meets the road. If you think of that as a tire or a wheel on your car, the part that touches the road is the outer part of the wheel or the tire. And so continual service improvement is the thing that's actually touching the road, if you will, and it's what's actually propelling the car down the road. Sure, the hub in the middle is turning everything outside of it, but continual service improvement's the thing that's actually propelling the car forward. If that part is not moving, then in all likelihood, the car itself is not moving. Something's wrong, and probably something down inside is wrong in order to make that a problem. Okay. So ITIL is a library, but it's more than that. Okay. So we want to think about that as well. It is a framework for providing IT services. Okay. There are some things that are referred to in different terminologies. There are things that are standards, for instance, okay? And ISO is a standard, okay? And there are several other kinds of things that are standards. There's a standard for the database querying language known as SQL. Okay? It's called Structured Query Language, but there is a published standard for what needs to be a part of that, and you have to kind of follow that to a great extent. Okay? But ITIL is not like that. It's merely a framework for the provision of IT services. Okay? And that framework is driven by processes. And so we're going to be showing you some things about the concept of process and how important that is to what's happened. But it's a process-driven framework. And of course, it's a library of well-tested information on the best ways of doing IT. Okay? So as you can see in the rest of the slide, it's a set of best practice publications for IT service management. Okay? So the publications contain information on doing that, and it describes what we refer to as a service life cycle, okay, in 5 books. Every book contains guidance on some service based on its stage within the particular life cycle. And so it will contain a set of IT service management processes that describe inputs, outputs, activities, and capabilities required to ensure that services are delivered. So we're going to talk a little bit about what processes are here in a minute so that we can understand a concept of that and what's built into that very well. Okay? So this is what ITIL basically is. It's a framework for providing services and not a standard, and it's a process-driven framework, and each IT department and each business ultimately has to choose which of those processes they're going to emphasize and or which of them they're going to leave out altogether. You actually have that kind of a choice. There's not some kind of a thing that says this has got to be this way. There's no overriding organization like a standards committee looking down and breathing down your neck and telling you, well, you missed this or you missed that. That's part of the flexibility of what ITIL is involved in. Okay? So that's what ITIL is. Now, how does it provide value to business? That's the key to it. Okay? There are some key benefits that the books do stress, one of which is the reduction in cost. Okay? You probably are aware of the fact that information technology can be expensive. And so there's a process called financial management that is designed to help primarily get costs under control and make sure that IT is not committing itself to deliver services that the business can't afford to pay for. Because in the final analysis, It's actually the business that pays for the services that are delivered by the IT department. Okay? All of those servers, all of those routers, all of those PCs, the printers, and every other bit of the infrastructure, the people that you hire, they all are paid for by the business. And so we're really talking about reducing cost to the business. Okay? Now, it will also improve IT services through the leveraging of those best practice processes that are the framework that lies underneath it. And when you do that, if you can improve the services, you will improve customer satisfaction. Okay? One of the big challenges that every IT department has is that customers can be dissatisfied. They think the IT department is a bunch of geeks that sit down in a basement, and all the light that's supplied for them is the 16 monitors that they sit around. But they're actually different people from that, and we need to improve the satisfaction of the customers. Okay? It provides a balanced and flexible approach to service provision. It also provides well-defined services that meet the current and future needs of all the customers of the IT department. Okay? Another thing that provides a benefit for ITIL is that it can quickly adapt to changing business needs and the maturity of the business. Okay? So if a business decides to move in a slightly different direction, ITIL sets a framework that allows the IT department to change with the business very easily. Okay? And it's basically called integration. Okay? If we can integrate the IT department and the business, they become like a hand in a glove. Okay? And they move along with one another all the time. So therefore, internal and external communication becomes absolutely critical, and ITIL will help to improve the communication because it provides some good things. It will also provide improved metrics to understand the quality and the value of services provided. That's one of the things that makes it difficult to provide an ITIL or an IT service, is that people don't know what the benefit of it is. What's there? What's the quality? How do we know that we're getting what we're paying for out of this? Well, you need some way to measure that. And that's where metrics come into play. And of course, continual service improvement that we're going to talk about a little bit in a minute is focused primarily on putting together good metrics that help to understand what the quality is and the value of the service being provided. Okay. So we talked about process. Just what is a process? It's defined in the library as a structured set of activities that are designed to accomplish a specific objective, and it will take one or more defined inputs and turn them into outputs. The output is really the reason for the process to start with. Okay? And so let me give you an illustration of this definition. There's a process that is known as incident management. That's one of the many processes in the ITIL framework. Okay. The input to incident management is some kind of a report that comes to the IT department, usually through the help desk, to let them know that there's some kind of issue or problem that's arisen. Somebody calls the help desk, or maybe there's a monitor attached to a database that shows that the database has gone down, or that the quality of the database performance has suffered. Okay. Those lead to an incident, and it gets reported then, and so that's the input. Some kind of a report, either from a user or a monitor or something of that nature, that lets the IT department know that there is an issue. Okay. The output of that is ultimately fixing whatever the issue was. Okay. Getting the person back up and working, getting the end user back to doing what they were doing to start with. And that's the ultimate output that's behind all of that. Okay? So processes are key to this. Now, some of them, the inputs and outputs are not quite as easily defined. Like, for instance, financial management is a process in the strategy phase of ITIL. And it's a little hard to identify the input. The output is very easily identified. It's a business case, it will be a financial analysis, and ultimately it will be the gaining of the funding from the business to provide a service. Those are the three things that are the outputs from financial management. Exactly what the input is may be a little bit more fuzzy. Maybe there will be a change request of some kind or another that says we'd like to have a new service, and that will kick off the financial management process. Okay? There might be other ways to kick that off as well. But every process will have an input and it will have an output. Okay? So there's something else about processes. We say that there are 4 characteristics of every process, okay, in the ITIL framework. And just to give you a picture, if you go through those stages, the strategy phase of ITIL has 5 processes in it. The design phase has 8. The transition phase has 7. The daily activity phase, that phase has 5 in it. That's where incident management is. Okay? And then continual service improvement has 1. Okay? So there's a lot of processes involved, but every one of them have these 4 characteristics. Okay? They're measurable in some specific way. Okay? We can see that you have some way to identify. If you look at incident management, for instance, call time can be measured. How long did an analyst stay on the phone? How long did it take to close a ticket? Other things like that can be measured directly. Okay? But all of them can be measured in some way or another. Okay? They also deliver specific results. Okay? That's the reason for the process existing. That's where the output comes into play. And they deliver those specific results to customers. Customers are the key. Now, there are 2 different kinds of customers. I didn't include a slide on that, but there's internal customers and external customers, but ultimately the external customer is the one that's the goal. Okay? We want to provide the results ultimate to the external customer. Okay? Yes, the business customer may be an intermediary through which that's done, but the external customer is the one we're shooting for. They're the ones that make our business what it is. And all processes respond to a specific trigger. So as I said, with incident management, it's a call to the help desk, letting them know that there's some kind of issue that has arisen at that point. Okay? Now, I also talk about service, because if you notice, the word service appears in all 5 of the phases: service strategy, service transition, or service design, service transition, service operations, and continual service improvement. So we need to know what a service is, as well as what a service provider is. A service is defined by ITIL as a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes that customers want to achieve without the ownership of the specific costs or risks. Now, there's a couple of things about this, and if you look at that definition, you may think, well, that sounded a little bit like the process definition. In fact, there are some process definitions that I've seen that are even closer to this than the one that I shared with you. Delivering value, for instance, to customers. That's the goal of both processes and services. And so some people wonder, well, what's really the difference between a process and a service? Well, if we can think of it this way, if you think of the process of incident management or problem management or request fulfillment or something like that, they can be related to any number of services. They are simply means by which we make sure that we are delivering services to people. Services are things like email and phone service and communication devices of other kinds, print services, database services, reporting services. Those are all services of various kinds that are done. And they use various capabilities and resources in order to deliver the value that goes out to the customers that get there. And it does this, and the service does deliver the value by facilitating the outcome the customers want without the ownership of the specific costs and risks. Now, that causes people some questions too. They say, well, wait a minute, we own that. How can we not own that? Well, if you think about it this way, if you're a customer of a cable company, for instance, or a dish network company of some kind or another, okay, and you ask yourself the question, could you afford all of the cost necessary to deliver that service to your house? The answer would be no. You can't afford that. You couldn't afford all the risks. But by sharing that across many thousands of customers, it's a little better. So that's where what that really refers to. Okay? Now, a service provider is an organization that supplies the services to either one or more internal or external customers. And the service provider can be both internal and can be external, okay, as we'll see in a little while. Okay, so you can have a service provider that's a part of the same organization that they're providing services for, or they can be a company. I worked for a while for a company in Dallas, Texas, known as CompuCom, and CompuCom is an external service providing organization, and they sell services to organizations, and so they're an external service provider. But the key to understanding a service is the quote at the bottom of the slide from Professor Theodore Levitt of Harvard Business School. It says, people want a quarter-inch hole, not a quarter-inch drill. Okay? So the service is the drill. Okay? But they don't want the service per se, they want the outcome. So they want the hole, they don't care how you drill it, how you get to it. Okay? And so we need to make that distinction, that we're shooting for an outcome, and make sure that our customers understand that that's where we're going, and that we understand that as well. So that's what a service is. It's a means of delivering value to customers. And we're going to see more about the concept of value here in a moment. Okay? There are two different kinds of services, just like there are two kinds of service providers. There are internal services. These are delivered between business units or departments in the same organization. And there are external services that are delivered to external service customers. Now, as I said, that's really the external customer that we're looking for. And on the next slide, we're going to see how this works and why it's so important. That sometimes these services may go directly through to an internal customer, but at other times they may go external to an external customer directly. Okay? So in looking at that, ultimately the customer outcome is what we're looking for. If you look down at the bottom, IT assets are things that are managed by various functions like technical management, IT operations management, application management, service desk. Okay? Those are different functions. Everybody in the IT department works in one of those functions. You may call it different things. You may call it the help desk. You may call it application development or something like that. You may call it IT operations rather than just IT operations management. You may call it technical services instead of technical management. It can have any different kinds of names that are built into it. Okay? But that provides a service of some kind or another. Okay? The service might be a case management application, so that you have an application that goes to a business customer of one kind or another. It might be a data entry screen. Let's say a bank. Let's take a bank for instance. You have a data entry screen that's attached to a database. And when a customer walks in the bank, they walk up to a teller, they deposit a check. The teller turns to a screen and uses an IT service to enter that data into the accounts for that customer. Okay? So that's going directly to them. They may process claims, or they may add deposits and things like that. The customer gets the end result. So if the customer walks in the bank and they deposit a check, if they walk into the bank from the teller puts the information in the IT service or the IT application. They print out a receipt and hand it to the customer, who walks out the bank and goes on their merry way. Okay? But there may be a time when the customer drives up to an ATM machine and deposits their check in the ATM machine. They get the same receipt or similar receipt that they might have gotten had they walked inside the bank, and so they get the same outcome. Their money is deposited and they get a receipt for it as if they had walked in the bank. The outcome to the customer is exactly the same. And that's why I say it's the external customer that we're shooting for, that we're trying to please. Okay? There may be an intermediary internal customer like the teller who works with that, or the claims processor at an insurance company. But whatever the case may be, it is always going to be that kind of a situation, that we're shooting for that external customer. They're the ones that we're trying ultimately to please in that environment. Okay? Now, value, we talked about it, it's delivering value. We want to get value to the customer. How does this happen? Well, ITIL defines actually a little formula that I want to just go over briefly. I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on this as I would otherwise. There are two parts to this, utility and warranty. Utility is the customer's perspective, and basically that says that it does what they expect it to do, and it does it in a way that it supports their performance, or maybe enhances their performance. Okay? So if the customer sits down at a data entry screen and they have to sit there, they type one letter at a time and wait 20 seconds for the next letter to go through, they're going to be a little frustrated. Okay? If they press the submit button and they have to sit there and wait for 20 minutes, they're not going to be very happy with that. Okay? So their performance is supported. Constraints are removed. That is, they can get logged into the system. They can do everything that they need to do. They don't have any issues as far as being able to get to it. That defines utility. Okay? Now, if either one of those turns out to be true, we say utility is there. Okay? Because if you have one, you'll have the other. Right? On the other side, a little bit more of what IT has to work with is to ask 4 questions. Is this service available enough? Is there enough capacity? Is it continuous enough? And is it secure enough? If you have all 4 of those, then you have warranty. Okay? And so those 2 things, utility and warranty, if you have both of them, that's why I put an and in between there, then you will deliver value. And so you need to come up, or an IT department needs to come up with a way of defining what they mean by performance supported, constraints being removed, and then on the 4 down below, they need to come up with a definition of what enough is. Okay? They need to know what that term means for each of those: availability, capacity, continuity, and security. Okay? We live in a day and time in which security is very heightened. The needs for security is very high, and so therefore, is it secure enough? It's going to have to be very secure in these days, or you're going to run into some of the kinds of problems that people had at places like Home Depot and Target if you don't have good security in place. Okay, so that answer has to be made. Is it secure enough? Well, depending on the business, that'll be different. But you have to have all of those, and you have to have both the utility and the warranty, and that will provide you with value. And we do know that perception is, of course, important in determining that, and you know that when you go in to buy a car. Okay? That every one of you has perhaps a different definition of what you think is valuable of car. You might like its performance, you might like the gas mileage, you might like the comfort of the leather seats, but ultimately you're going to be asking these 6 questions to determine that. And with IT services, you're going to be doing the same thing. Now, I said that ITIL was both flexible and stable. Okay. The flexibility of ITIL comes in what we talked about it being a framework and not not standard. Okay. It's non-prescriptive, meaning that it can apply to all types of service organizations and service providers, all sizes of business, one way or the other. It uses best practices. It doesn't use a set of rules and laws and regulations, but best practices that represent the experience of hundreds of companies and world-class best-in-practice service providers, that they do what they want. And it's also vendor neutral. It's applicable to any kind of an organization. It's not based on any particular technology or platform or even industry type. So companies like insurance companies, banks, hospitals, governmental organizations, small nonprofit organizations, all have implemented ITIL. I have taught people from all areas of all kinds of business. I've had banks and insurance companies and airlines, airports in Columbus, Ohio. I go up there quite often, and I teach ITIL classes. And one of the classes I taught had some people from the Columbus Regional Airport that were in the class. So there are people from all kinds of business. I've had people from the Ohio Attorney General's office. I have had people from the Ohio Department of Transportation. You name it, I've probably seen it, okay, in one way or another. So there's no particular industry type or platform that's there. So it's very flexible. Another way that it's flexible, this non-prescriptive type or point up here, is that I sometimes tell the class, when you go through this class, because usually they're taking it in order to be certified, and so they're going to take a test at the end of the week, and I tell them, what you learn during this week, you need to learn it so that you can pass the test. But don't think that what we tell you to do in this class is necessarily the only way you can do things within the ITIL framework. You can do it however it best suits you. We even used to talk about being under an umbrella, okay? That there's a big umbrella of how IT services can be provided, and what you want to do is provide those inside of that umbrella. And that's the best approach to that. So it's very flexible, but it's also stable. Okay? The stability comes in the fact that ITIL provides a very clear way of working. You go through a process of things, like, for instance, some of the processes will have some steps that you need to do in order to accomplish something. If you go through, for instance, change management, there's a set of steps that need to be followed, and you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and ultimately you'll come out at the end. If you don't follow that clear way of working, then your organization's not going to be very mature. It's also stable because everybody will know their place and know their responsibilities. So ITIL recommends several tools. One is a RACI chart, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, that they recommend in order for you to be able to know exactly what everybody is supposed to be doing in order to provide a given service, so that we know who is accountable for it, who's responsible for it, who will be consulted, and who will be informed. And so everybody will know their place and know their responsibility. Stability is also provided in that ITIL has as much proactive things to it as reactive. Reactivity is where something goes wrong and you start responding. Okay? So a printer goes down or a server goes down, and all of a sudden nobody can log into a system, and everybody, the whole IT department gets together trying to figure out what's going on with it. And that's fine. You have to have that in place. But it's better to be proactive ahead of time, because that provides the stability to keep it going without any kind of issues or problems. So we want to have more proactivity than we do reactivity, and ITIL will provide that stability. Okay? So it's flexible, yes, in that you can implement ITIL in the way that's best suited to your company, but it's also stable by providing a clear way of working, giving everybody a knowledge of what their place and their responsibility is, and does a lot of proactive things in order to make it work. Okay? Now, continual service improvement, as I mentioned, is kind of the bedrock of everything that we go through in the ITIL framework. It kind of lies at the bottom of everything that's there. Okay? It's a clear and unmistakable and important part of that. As you see, it's down at the bottom. The other slide wrapped around, but here you see strategy, design, transition, and operations. They're feeding continual service improvement, but it feeds them. And we should have arrows moving up from this to each one of those, because it actually touches on each one of them in every way. So it's the underpinning of ITIL. I've even seen a book that for one of the classes that we teach that actually starts with continual service improvement. Okay? That was the first intermediate level course that I ever took, and so it was a great course for that, and it's a great way to help you understand everything that there is about the ITIL framework. Continual service improvement is absolutely important. An example of where somebody didn't engage in continual service improvement that caused a problem. We're all familiar with Blockbuster, or maybe I say all are. Most of us would remember Blockbuster, the world's largest movie rental company, and probably there was a Blockbuster somewhere near you at some point or another. Well, they had to file for bankruptcy several years ago because they did not adapt their storefront model to online technology that Netflix did. Okay? So, you know, Blockbuster had over 3,000 stores in the U.S., and it just shrank while Netflix was growing. They were renting the same movies, but they were doing it online and sending them out through the mail. Okay? It was so much easier for people. Just go online to Netflix. Other things like Coinstar and Redbox provide DVD rental at drugstores and supermarkets. They're actually doing pretty well, even in spite of what Netflix is doing. Those two companies, you'll see those boxes every once in a while for people who like to go get them, the physical thing directly. Okay? And the things are changing, but Blockbuster just didn't change. And so they ran into a problem. They had to file for bankruptcy. That's where continual service improvement can help, and how it can help to provide value to your business in that. So what are the next steps to take after going through this webinar? Okay. One of the things is to consider enrolling your business managers and your directors in an ITIL awareness class. This is a one-day class that goes through the framework and explains it from a business perspective so that business managers and directors can understand. The full foundation course is 3 days long, and at the end of the 3 days there is an exam that's taken for certification. And it's a little bit heady for people who are not IT professionals. So business managers and directors, this particular class is a great course for them to take. And so I would recommend that to you if you're a business manager, to contact your local New Horizons and talk about taking an ITIL awareness class. Okay? Now, I didn't put it on the slide, but then beyond that, once you've done that and see the real value in it, then get involved in getting your IT department to move their people into the foundation level class, and then maybe the intermediate level classes. Intermediate level classes, there are 5 of them, and they last for 4 days, and they take an exam at the end of that. And then there's one more class called Managing Across the Life Cycle. Okay? So there are actually several steps and levels to getting to the level of being either an ITIL expert or an ITIL master at the top level. Okay? You might want to do a survey of your whole business employees regarding the health of your IT department. Okay? That might uncover some things. If people say, well, IT never gets back to us, they never respond to us, it's a good thing for you to know as business managers, and so that you can perhaps uncover some issues or problems with that. Okay? And get feedback from your IT management team as well. Let them tell you how they think things can go better, and that will certainly provide you with a lot of help from that. But we would be more than happy to help you out in getting enrolled in either an awareness class or some of the foundation classes or intermediate level classes. Simply contact an account executive in order to do that. Okay, so I wonder if there are any questions. I know we said we're going to have you put those in the question box. If there are, he's going to share those with me. So go ahead, Rocco.
Sure. All right. Thank you, Lynn. I do have one question, but I'll give you guys a few more minutes here to place them. Anything. Again, you could just use the chat window or the actual questions box. I do have one, and it says, I'm sorry if you already answered this question, but does ITIL training automatically lead to ITIL certification?
Automatically, not necessarily. No, you have to take an exam that is at the end of the course, after you've taken the course, and when you pass the exam, that gives you certification. Okay? Now, I've trained, as I mentioned, thousands of people, and we've been very successful. Personally, of the people that have come through the class that have took it when I was the instructor, about 95% of them have passed the test. So that's pretty close to a direct line to certification. Then there are certifications up at an intermediate level where you take intermediate level courses, and each one of them has a test. and so on and so forth. But it's not a direct thing, but it does get you there through an exam.
Got it. Okay, got one more asking, is the awareness class you discussed the same thing as ITIL Foundations, or is that a different thing?
It's a different course. The awareness class is a one-day class, and it's kind of like a 50,000-foot flyover of ITIL that gives you an idea of what the whole program is about and kind of how it works and how it's going to provide value to the business. The foundation class gets into the more nitty-gritty of it. It's more like a 10,000-foot flyover. So you go from the 50,000-foot flyover to the 10,000-foot flyover, and I throw a lot of stuff at people, and they have to answer 40 questions at the end of that, and it can be a little bit more challenging. There is no certification associated with the awareness class.
Okay. One more is asking, is the certification done the last day of the training? Or the exam, I guess.
Okay. We typically offer that opportunity to students to take it as soon as the class is over. We'll have a proctor come into the classroom and literally take it right there. Or they can schedule it later. That's entirely up to them. For the foundation level class, you don't even have to take the class. That's not an absolute requirement. You can take the exam, but I wouldn't recommend that because it's really very important to get somebody's help in understanding how the questions are put together and how they're worded. Okay? And so I would recommend taking the class, but the exam would have to be after the class. Now the intermediate level courses, you must sit in the class and in order to be able to take the test.
Okay. I'll give another minute, but before we depart, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this webinar is recorded and it'll be available later today on our YouTube channel. And all you got to do is visit nhls.com and look for our YouTube icon, and there you could find the playlist. All right, Lynn, it looks like we do not have any more questions. I want to thank you again for your time, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you, Rocco, and thanks everybody who attended.
All right, have a great day.
Bye.